The ghosts of elections past have come back to haunt us. This after people claiming to be victims of the 2007-2008 post-election violence lodged complaints at the DCI headquarters that they had received new threats, especially now with the heightened political campaigns in the country. And then we heard from no less than the Director of Criminal Investigations himself, followed by a clarification that he would not be seeking to reopen already concluded cases. And what followed were swift reactions from the President and the MPs from the Rift Valley. Now let me state here first that I do not hold brief for those who've made claims of receiving threats. The veracity or otherwise of their claims will be for the investigators to ascertain. But the reactions to this new development have demonstrated just how unprepared we are as a country to deal with that dark episode of our history and truly resolve it. Beyond the outcome of the cases at The Hague, for example, what efforts have we really made locally towards restorative justice, healing, and reconciliation? It would seem truth and justice is simply inconvenient for leaders in this country. I mean, how else would one explain that the TJRC report, the first real comprehensive attempt at addressing the past, remains in the shelves 7 years later? Since May 2013, when the report was presented to the President and thereafter to the National Assembly, why has nothing been done about it? The TJRC report recommended an implementation committee and even went as far as to draft a bill for the National Assembly to consider. What does this say about the President's and Parliament's commitment, considering the President's party has wielded a considerable majority in the National Assembly throughout his administration? That's 2 terms. The President himself stands accused of paying lip service to addressing the sins of the past. Now, do you remember when he publicly apologized for past historical injustices during his State of the Nation address 5 years ago in 2015? And do you also remember that during that same address, he established what he called a restorative justice fund of 10 billion shillings? Well, 5 years later, no money has been set aside for this fund. In fact, the last I heard of it was former Attorney General Githu Muigai blaming, and I quote, convoluted bureaucratic processes, end quote, for the delay in setting it up. And then he went on to talk about a lack of clarity on where the funds would be placed and how they would be administered. Surely, clarity is all that's lacking 5 years later? And this is not just an inconvenience, by the way, for the President and his party, but for the other side too. You see, during the campaigns for the 2017 presidential election, ODM party leader Raila Odinga promised to implement the TJRC report if elected. Now, I acknowledge that he did not win the mandate of the people, but isn't it interesting that there is no more talk of this now? If this is something that he was truly committed to, wouldn't we hear more about this now, considering that he is reported to have the President's ear? And yet, all we have seen this time is handshakes. First between the then President Mwai Kibaki and Raila Odinga, and then President Uhuru Kenyatta and his deputy president ahead of the 2013 election that we were told was a sign of healing, particularly for 2 communities that had been at loggerheads in 2007. And then came the latest handshake between President Uhuru Kenyatta and ODM leader Raila Odinga, with the words "never again" echoed once again. And yet here we are, with fresh claims of profiling and loud protestations and open discomfort by a section of members of Parliament at the mere mention of relooking the cases of 2007. Folks, let's be honest. The scars run deep in this country, not just with the victims of post-election violence in 2007, but even with those of elections before that in areas like Molo and Likoni. There are other past injustices like the Wagala massacre and many others that would take me a whole night to enumerate. What is clear is that we have not solved them and that justice has not been done, neither has it even been seen to be done. Isn't it time we truly looked our ugly past in the face and once and for all confronted it? I rest my case, and that is my take.